To secure the continent, I am Gbenga Aborowa. This is the show where we bring you all the security updates and happenings across the continent. Now let's begin with the trending security headlines. Nigerian government declares bandits rocking the northwest and north central of the country as terrorists. Patients are dying in Tigray as a blockade continues to prevent medicine and other medical supplies from reaching those in need. And protests continue against military rule in Sudan, even after the resignation of former Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok. Stay tuned, we will be right back. Today on the program, we will be looking at major security highlights from 2021 from countries like Nigeria to Mali and Libya.
Security was without a doubt one of Africa's greatest challenges in 2021. From the north to the south and the east to the west, nations found it hard to maintain peace. Brothers warred against each other in Ethiopia. Citizens rose against their government in Sudan. Senegalese youth trooped out onto the streets in protest against their president. Students in Eswatini were at the heart of a fight for democracy as they called for an end to the country's unitary absolute monarchy. Cameroonians in the north and southwest of the country push for secession, and South Sudan is still yet to feel the warmth of peace. Rebels reigned in Burkina Faso, maimed innocent citizens in the Central African Republic, and killed the president in Chad. Terrorism maintained a hold on Mozambique and the Republic of Congo, and hit harder in Nigeria as banditry and kidnap for ransom became the order of the day. In Mali and Guinea, the military overthrew democratic governments. Across the length and breadth of the continent, citizens fled their homes and cried out for peace as lives and properties were lost to the insecurity that plagued the continent.
Now, joining me on the show today is Kabir Adamu, a security expert from Abuja, and Dr. Colombo Matoba. He is a lecturer in international relations and development at Mulungushi Public University in Zambia. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you, Gbenga. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Now, although instability preceded the war that began in November 2020, Ethiopia's conflict has since gained impetus and intensity. Bringing the warring parties to the negotiation table is an absolute priority in order to stop the bloodshed and sustain any chance of peaceful settlement of the conflict. By December last year, the federal government was attempting to quell the advances of the Tigray People's Liberation Front and its allies as they approach the capital, Addis Ababa. A humanitarian crisis is unfolding in many parts of the country. My first question to you, Kabir Adamu, is Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, a Nobel Peace Prize recipient, who was once seen as the country's peacemaker and a democratic liberalizer, is now leading the country, a country to begin to turn on itself. What went wrong?
So the ethnic dynamics, as well as the political dynamics in the country, and I guess the desire to restructure and establish a more, perhaps, for lack of a better word, a transparent system of transition in the country led to what we saw, the crisis and the war. The various composition of ethnic groupings and their influence within, especially the military and other political spheres in Ethiopia, has been a huge issue that has affected the peace and stability of the country, and with the Prime Minister's desire to change that composition, and perhaps the involvement of other countries around the region. We saw how what could have been addressed really as an internal issue has now become a regional challenge that with huge consequences on both Ethiopia, Eritrea, and to an extent, some of the neighboring countries within the region. And you're right, the irony is that this is someone who, at one point was, declared someone who represented the peace symbol in the continent, and currently he has, removed even his toga of presidency, and he's leading a war campaign. For me, that's perhaps the most phenomenal development in 2021. The fact that the president, sitting president, who was once seen as an advocate of peace, is now the leading his country in a war that is frankly an internal strife, an internal war.
Quite an irony, if you ask me. Now, Kabir, Nigeria's former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, is the African Union Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa and is leading mediation efforts. How successful have these mediation efforts been so far? And is there still a window of opportunity to bring this conflict to a negotiated settlement?
So unfortunately, no. We've seen both the former president Obasanjo, as well as the U.S. envoy, who attempted to mediate between the two sides. And at the point, we had a statement from the U.S. envoy saying that he's given up. He's reached a point where he can no longer continue in the mediation effort. Former President Obasanjo seemed to be obstinate in his usual manner and optimistic, and perhaps understanding the cultural dynamics, as well as using his influence, as it were, his previous relationships. And like I said, the understanding of the cultural dynamics may bring in some effort. But so far, what we are seeing is each side is kind of stuck on its ideas. Some of the big gains that the TPLF made in the past is being eroded with advances by the Ethiopian army. So it's very difficult for compromise in such a position, especially when at a point it was TPLF that was seen as the dogged side that refused to yield. And then now that the Ethiopian side seems to be winning, it will be very difficult for that side. But having said that, I think there are opportunities, especially if multilateral bodies such as the AU and to an extent the UN comes in. The dynamics are clear. The issues, like I said, are transition around governance and all that, and the power play within the country. So once that is understood and each side is made to give to an extent what is required to achieve peace in the country, and I think there is still some room for hope. But the fact that this issue, this crisis has gone on for this long, and the fact that each side is sort of stuck within its own premise of what it wants to achieve, and the failure of recent diplomatic efforts makes any compromise solution a little bit difficult.
Thank you very much, Kabir. I'm happy you mentioned international organizations. I will take you up on that. But first, let me bring in Dr. Kutumba from Zambia. Dr. Kutumba, thanks for joining us on the show.
Good evening.
Good evening to you. Now, Dr. Kutumba, it looks like the momentum is against peace efforts. Now with Addis Ababa doubling down on the war, the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is even joined the war efforts, is in the war front, and the federal government in Ethiopia has gone ahead to classify the Tigray People's Liberation Front as a terrorist group. What is the feeling in Addis Ababa, and do the people feel some type of peace can be achieved, or are they resolved to a sort of military standoff in Addis Ababa?
Okay, thank you very much for your your question. To start with, let me start with first the source or the causes of the Ethiopian war between the central government, federal government, and the Tigray province. To me, the main cause is poor sharing of power. The Tigray province, people from Tigray provinces feel that they are not represented and they are being marginalized. And when you look at Tigray as a province, is one of the poor province in Ethiopia. Then for them to survive, they are depending on the federal government, which is marginalizing them. That is the main cause first, which has led the people of Tigray province to involve or to join terrorism as a way of claiming their right, so that they are being considered as part of Ethiopia.
Now, Dr. Katumba, sorry to butt in there. The war has been going on for over a year. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed thought it was just going to be a quick military incursion into Tigray, and things will be back to normal. It's been over a year. There's serious humanitarian situation there. Hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced. My question to you, Dr. Katumba, is this. What do the people feel it's only a military situation, a military operation that can bring this to an end? What is the feeling on the ground?
Yes, I don't think a military intervention in Tigray can bring a sustainable solution. The best solution is the Tigray leaders to sit at the table with the federal government and negotiate. Because even in the military intervention, more especially from outside, they are coming in not to settle, to find a solution, but to defend their own interest. Okay. But the best is Ethiopian on their own. Let's sit and find a solution.
Thank you very much.
Military intervention is not a solution, and it keeps on going on and on.
Thank you very much, Dr. Katumba. I'd like to get back to Kabir here. Kabir, you mentioned efforts of international multilateral organizations in order to try to bring this war to an end. Now, what strings do international powers have left to pull the different parties at war? The United Nations is calling for a humanitarian corridor. The United States has exercised some type of leverage by removing Ethiopia from its favored trading status. Others have said, you know, Ethiopia is a recognized central government. They should be the bigger party here. But if they give consensus, if they allow humanitarian corridors, others have said it might just be fueling the war and giving the Tigrayans more impetus to fight. Do we have a Mexican standoff here, or are there still jokers that the international community can use to bring this war to an end?
I believe there are always jokers. It's very likely, even though there are no facts to point to here, but it's very likely there are countries that are supporting both sides. In fact, in the case of the Ethiopian central government, we know that Eritrea has been fingered as one of the countries that is well supported it, and in fact, there were instances where there was an accusation where troops from Eritrea were suggested to have gone into Tigray in pursuit of the interest of the Ethiopian central government. So that's the kind of pressure I believe that the international community can put in, both the obvious and then the not so obvious collaborators, the weapons that both sides are using. I mean, none of these countries is able to manufacture weapons. They're either buying these weapons from some other countries, or there are gun running channels through which they are exploiting to get the weapons as well as the ammunition. that they are using to fight, both the war. So pressure on those countries, diplomatic pressure, and sometimes even taking it a little bit further, would help. If you starve or reduce their ability to procure weapons, then the desire to enter a compromise agreement would be higher. Again, the possibility of even the political incentives for the continuation of the conflict by some external powers, including the US, which has been fingered in some instances, is also a factor to consider. So there is a lot that these multilateral bodies, including the AU, the UN, and then of course countries like the US can play in terms of bringing all of this to an end.
Thank you very much, Kabir. Now, moving away from the situation in Ethiopia, let's now examine the security situation in the Sahel region of Africa. I'm talking about Chad, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. The Malian government has expressed willingness to explore dialogue with Islamist insurgents, some of whom have sent reciprocal conciliatory signals. Previous talks among communal leaders, militants, and militiamen yielded several local ceasefires that eased suffering in rural areas. Yet no one has taken steps to prepare high-level negotiations. Thousands have died as Mali's conflict grinds on. Both the army and the jihadis have been taking increasing heavy losses, and this applies to Burkina Faso too. But neither party appears to capable of securing a military victory. Ethnic violence is also spiraling. Foreign partners are showing signs of exasperation with the country's interlocking security political crisis. Even the French Operation Berkane, they've been drawing down their troops' numbers. I'd like to start with Kabir here. Both Mali's government and the country's largest jihadist group in Jamaat Nasratul Islam wal Muslimin, JNIM, that's the acronym we'll be using for the rest of the show. Just to simplify things, say they want to talk about ending their bloody conflict, yet neither party has taken steps to make dialogue happen. Why are these talks important?
The conflict has been ongoing for more than a decade now. It has led to the collapse of, as far as I can remember, almost 3 or 4 governments. And so the country has experienced untold social, political, and to an extent economic hardship as a result of the conflict. The aspirations of the rebels when they started, which is to carve out a country for themselves, has not been achieved. Neither have they been able to subject or subdue the incursions by both the international as well as the Malian government. And so the most obvious thing really at this point is to re-strategize and, if possible, come to some form of amicable resolution. Now, whether that would be in form of a dialogue, self-driven, where the two sides meet and discuss, or a dialogue that is, facilitated by international partners, the objective will be the same. Unfortunately, however, just like we have seen in several other countries, the influence of some of these international countries would perhaps make this a little bit difficult. You talked about the French and the presence of Operation Barkhane. And then very recently, we've also seen Russia, or at least an element of the Russian foreign power coming into Mali. So all of this would play. Of course, the influence of countries around Mali, such as the North African countries, and to an extent the situation in Libya, would also have an impact in whatever these groups would like to do. Most of the terror groups that are operational in Libya have affiliations with either Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State in West Africa province. So irrespective of what their stated objective is, the fact that these groups, I'm not aware that in any part of the world that Al-Qaeda or IS has ended any conflict in negotiation, in compromise, then makes it very difficult. I take whatever JNIM says with a pinch of salt because of this possibility.
Okay, let's get to Dr. Matuba in Zambia. Dr. Matuba, France is Mali's most important ally. They oppose dialogue with this transnational terrorist groups, and they have also pulled out a number of troops from its Operation Berkane. But if you look at the geographical area of Mali is quite large, and this war against terrorism is extended beyond its borders. There are those that oppose foreign intervention in solving African conflicts. They say Africans should be able to deal with their own situations. But now you can see that the conflict in the Sahel has spread to neighboring countries. My question to you, Doctor, is this. Can this war be won militarily? And do you think the Malians and the African Union intervention force in Mali do have the capacity to go all the way, or do you think this war would end through a negotiated settlement?
Yes, thank you very much for your questions. You're asking if the AU can intervene or negotiate so that this all can come at an end. Let me start with first the Berkane intervention from France Republic. The intervention of French is not welcomed by the Malian people and the Malian the people of Mali, even by the Malian government. Reason being, the French has been intervening in that region for several years back, but they have never brought a good result. And you find that it's like they are the one manipulating wars in that region for their own interest. With the current government, which is not in a good book with the French Republic, it's good for the Malian themselves to get away France, because they have got opposite interests, and it's better for me, Mali, to rely on AU intervention, which may find a stable solution and to get rid of the terrorists in Mali and in the whole region. And according to the research, those terrorists, they are linked with the government of France, and they are the ones supported them for their interest in that region. The best for me is the Malian government to rely on other sources and supporters, and in first position, the AU would be the best for me to find a peaceful solution in the region.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Matuba. Just before we go on a break, I would like to take your final thoughts on this before we move to our next country on our searchlight. Kabir, Dr. Matuba suggested an Afrocentric solution to the problem. Now, and also other international partners that would align with what the Malian people want. As we speak, their Russian advisors, they say they're there on the invitation of the Malian central government, and there are also reports that Wagner Group is in Mali. So are we back to the 1990s Cold War fight, while the interest of the Malian people is not even considered? I know you don't have a crystal ball in front of you, but can you sketch us a picture or a path on how to get a resolution to this conflict?
It's the difficulty of the situation is the governance challenge. I mean, it's very difficult really to convince the ordinary Malian to accept anything beyond what he's feeling. And so where foreign countries such as the US, insist on the projection of their foreign policy, which is to allow democracy to take place and all that. Yes, the civil society organizations and a few persons in Mali would be happy to hear that. But then what of the reality on ground, the economic hardship that I talked about, the social issues, the political issues that are at play? So looking into this crystal ball that you mentioned, the likelihood of the military junta staying a little bit longer than the AU would want them to stay, than ECOWAS would want them to stay, is very, very high, mainly because of this desire to address some of the political issues that are on ground, to provide a platform for mitigating the economic challenges and those social issues. So I foresee a situation where, this back and forth between both the AU and ECOWAS and the Malian junta with regards to the transition program would be a little bit longer than some of us hope, irrespective of what influence these foreign countries would play. I don't foresee a Cold War situation like you mentioned. The influence that Russia has in the region is not as it used to be. Yes, it's trying to make a comeback, but again, remember there are global issues that are currently happening that would make Russia a little bit difficult for Russia to play that role in Africa at the moment. So again, I think it boils down to the negotiation between the Malian government and the bodies like AU, the ECOWAS, and then of course countries like the US and the EU too. We shouldn't forget the influence of the EU in the region and its capacity to influence the outcome of the transition program.
Okay, I guess this is a fine place to go on a break right now, and when we come back, we have more for you. Stay with Secure the Continent on News Central Television. Welcome back to Secure the Continent here on News Central Television. I'm still here with Kabir Adamu and Dr. Colombo Matoba. Now our focus shifts to Nigeria, the West African economic powerhouse. Now, Nigeria is confronted by multiple security challenges, notably the resilient Boko Haram Islamist insurgency in the northeast, long-running discontent and militancy in the Niger Delta, increasing violence between herders and farming communities spreading from the central belt southward, and separatist Biafra agitation in the Igbo southeast. Violence, particularly the Boko Haram insurgency, has displaced more than 2 million people, created a massive humanitarian crisis, and prompted the rise of civilian vigilante self-defense groups that pose new policy dilemmas and possible security risk. Now, Kabir, last year, the Nigerian Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, President Muhammadu Buhari, who happens to be a former general in the Nigerian army, sacked service chiefs that were replaced last year but there seems to be no latter in incidences of insecurity. Why is that so, and is it too early to bring out the scorecard?
No, it's not too early. I think they spent a couple of months now. If I remember well, this should be their either 7 to 8 months or even longer than that, that these generals have been at the head of this, military units and departments. I was asked this question after the change of the service chiefs, whether we're going to see an end to security challenges. And I said it clearly, I said no. The issues that Nigeria is confronted with are not issues that can be tackled militarily. And this has been the bane of Nigeria's approach to addressing security challenges, which is a legacy from the long years of military rule. Just today, a sitting governor in Nigeria issued a statement, I think it was yesterday, but reported in the media today, where he complained against the withdrawal of the military from his state. Now, this is instructive. You have a situation where the military is deployed in over 34 states of the Nigerian Federation. In fact, you can extend it to say in all the 36 states of the Federation and Abuja, carrying out internal security operations. That is an abnormal situation. The military is not meant to be involved in internal security matters. And you have a sitting governor who is a lawyer actually complaining that they are being withdrawn. And that tells you what the challenge is in Nigeria in terms of the Nigerian approach to addressing security challenges. I started with that opening remark to lay the foundation that the drivers of insecurity in Nigeria are not issues that can be addressed militarily. They are issues that require good governance to address. So poverty, unemployment, the effects of climate change, the weak justice system that does not arrest and punish offenders, porous borders, proliferation of small arms and light weapons, and socioeconomic grievances. These are not things that can be addressed with military power. They require governance approach, especially better coordination between the federal and state government. And so, yes, the military has a role to play, but the military is just one out of several other security departments. Its role in national defense is critical. You can't take that away from the military. But internal security issues are not military issues.
Okay, thank you very much for that submission. Now, Dr. Matoba, we've seen what happened in Afghanistan after more than 20 years in the United States operations in Afghanistan. A lot of analysts will tell you it was a failure. The Taliban is back to the central government in Kabul. They're controlling things. So my question here is the war against Boko Haram and other groups winnable? Because it's not your conventional warfare as we know it. Is more asymmetrical. They hit soft targets, they disappear. It's more of a guerrilla type of warfare. And the Nigerian central government has spent billions in acquiring weapons, planes, and it seems to be no latter. So is this war really winnable, or should we look for other solutions and address the root cause that is driving this insurgency?
Thank you for the question. Okay. For a stable solution, yes, quite okay. The Afghanistan have been supporting the Boko Haram to destabilize the peace in Nigeria, quite okay. But the best solution is to go to the cause of the problem, which is not only external, but to me, it is also internal. Because we can't just accuse the external, even the internal government or politicians have got also a upper hand in Boko Haram operations. So the best for me is to go to the root cause of the problem, which has been mentioned by, one of them has been mentioned by my colleague. First of all, good governance. Good governance, the democratization of federal institutions, creation of employment, and the other internal issues. Those are the root causes first, because those are the causes which have led young ones to join Boko Haram, more especially because of hardship. If there were no internal problems and the country was at peace economically, politically, I don't think if the youth could have feel to join Boko Haram in a big number the way it is and to resist for a long period of time.
Absolutely. The socioeconomic conditions, like Kabir mentioned earlier, have created a fertile ground for recruitment of this Boko Haram recruits. Now, my question to you, Kabir, is this, before we wrap up Nigeria. The federal government yesterday formally declared bandit groups operating in the country as terrorists. The declaration titled Terrorism Prevention Prescription Order 2021 is contained in volume 108 of the Federal Republic of Nigeria Official Gazette. How significant is this declaration in addressing banditry and security challenges in Nigeria, or is it just tokenistic?
So it is significant. It fulfills the requirement of the country's governing law on terrorism, which is the Terrorism Prevention Act as amended 2013. And so the legal basis for addressing the issue has been provided. And the next stage, which we're hoping to see, is for the policy framework to now be adopted, which is the National Counterterrorism Strategy 2016. That framework provides for about 5 key elements with which the government can use to address these groups. And the objective of those key elements is to contain those groups, prevent them from getting support, both membership as well as support of the populace where they are operational, arrest their members, prosecute their members where they resist arrest or they continue with their operations. The law enforcement agents are even allowed to kill them, confiscate their assets, and where it's possible, enhance the de-radicalization and counter-radicalization components of the strategy by the government so that new people, youths especially, who would want to join these groups are prevented. So again, it's very important, depending on what government decides to do after this proclamation.
Thank you very much, Kabir. We'll move in from Nigeria to Dr. Matuba's region. I'm talking about the southern part of the continent and the insurgency in Mozambique, to be specific, the northern district of Cabo Delgado. How important is Cabo Delgado and how strategic is it to Mozambique and the region, Dr. Matuba?
Yes, Cabo Delgado in Mozambique is a strategic region in the sense that there is a lot of oil there, and which is being managed by the French. Reason being, when the terrorists attacked that province, quickly the French people, without wasting time, jumped in to secure their interest in that rich region where there is a lot of reserve of oil. So it is strategic in the sense that there is a lot of oil there, and which has been given to the French government. And some groups within the region are not happy because they are benefiting from that multinational company. And that's the reason why they turned in terrorism, so that they can claim that riches which belong to them and they have to benefit.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matuba. Quickly, before we move away from Mozambique, Kabir, SADC and Rwandese soldiers were drafted, although the Mozambican central government showed some resistance to foreign intervention at first, but it seems that they're making some progress in Cabo Delgado. How would you rate their mission so far, and is it too early to call it a success?
Well, within the period of the deployment, we haven't seen any major incident. So if we're using that basis, then we would say it's been successful. But what of the long-term indices? What are the likely issues that would drive a continuation? So number one, border management issues. What kind of attempt has the Mozambican as well as SADC done to improve border management, intelligence sharing between member states to identify the groups that were individuals and groups that were behind the attack, and that would probably engage in future attempts to attack. That's the kind of progress that I would like to see for long-term successes. Training of the various law enforcement agencies, especially counter-terrorism, which, as you probably are aware, most African countries are not very good with managing terrorism because they are used to conventional warfare, but terrorist attacks are usually asymmetric. And so, both the military as well as the other security departments will have to be trained in this regard. So for long-term successes, these are some of the things I'm hoping to see, both in Mozambique and then within SADC. And then we can now say, yes, this deployment has been a success.
Now, Dr. Matuba, there's no way we would review the security situation in Africa in 2021 and we won't bring up Libya. We know what happened when the government of long-term dictator Colonel Muammar Gaddafi was toppled, and some of the effect is that a blowback of that is what we're seeing in the Sahel and other parts of the continent. Now, Libya is probably the most troubled region in Africa. In northern Africa, and could be what could be seen as a solution to those challenges. The United Nations led mediation did try to hold elections on Christmas Eve, 24th of December last year. That didn't work out. They've recommended the central government in Libya, the government of national unity, has suggested pushing it by 6 months. Do you think? And looking at the characters of those who are in the front line of contesting the Libyan presidency, you have people that have criminal records against them. Saif al-Islam, General Khalifa Haftar, and the current head of the National Assembly, Abdulhamid Beiba. Do you think that elections would bring about lasting peace to Libya and make Libya turn a new point towards peace?
Okay, thank you. To my view, most of the leaders who are involved there to organize a sustainable and peaceful elections, most of them have got a record of being involved in a conflict. Being involved in conflict for a long period of time and fighting over power, which has not united the Libyan people because of their self-interest. I don't think if the same leaders would achieve a good, fair and fair elections, because each one there has got his own interest and they would like his party to go into power. And I don't think if one of the party in opposition win the elections, I don't think if the other parties will agree, they will go back to war. The best for me is to involve people who are not involved in a conflict for a long period of time.
Interest. Now, Kabir, just before we wrap up, I'd like to throw this question back to you. The United Nations in the West often feel that democracy is a one-size-fits-all system of government. Some of these Arab Spring governments are used to strongmen. You have a situation where, look at the Gulf monarchies, for example, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Omanis. There's no democracy there. So is it an oversight on the part of Western governments to assume that elections will bring about lasting solutions to the protracted security situation in Libya?
Well, to an extent, yes. The entire Western Hemisphere believes in democracy, and one of the best ways to transition into a democratic government is to hold free and fair elections. But we shouldn't lose sight of what happened and why we're where we are in Libya. Now, irrespective of what Muammar Gaddafi did, the circumstances that led to the uprising and that led to his killing, we've seen the outcome is what we have in Libya today. The outcome is what we have in most Sahelian countries, including Nigeria. And I'm very, very worried that both the Western countries and Libyans themselves have not learned the lesson from that. Now, a leader may be very bad, but then how do you remove that leader? What vacuum is created after that leader is removed? And then even when that vacuum is created, what measures have you taken in place to manage the dynamics of that vacuum and the consequences of the removal of that leader? Power blocks have been created. These power blocks are allied to different countries in the world. So essentially what you have in Libya is a proxy war between some influence players globally. And it is in this circumstance that an election wants to be held. Frankly, that election, even if it's held, just like my co-speaker mentioned, the outcome is likely going to be disputed. So first off is to address these dynamics, these power blocks, especially the foreign backers, the role of countries like Russia, Turkey, to an extent the United States, France, Italy, and several other Arab countries. I know there has been an attempt to hold multilateral meetings where all of these power play blocks are brought together. But then how would the interest of all of these power players be laid? One major issue that, especially as a Nigerian, that worries us is the mercenaries that have come into the countries with the support of all of these foreign players that I've mentioned. What happens if an election is held in Libya? One of the demands of the multilateral meetings that was had the last time was that the mercenaries should leave Libya. Now, where are they going to go to? They are going to all of these conflict areas that we've mentioned in Africa, especially the ones in the Sahel region. So imagine what would happen with the current conflict going on, and then players like the mercenaries in Libya now would come Absolutely. With their strategies, with their weapons and all that. So these are issues that I think would need to be clearly addressed, and not just by Libya, but by players within the country, so that at the end of the day, we don't end up solving the challenge in Libya, and then we create bigger challenge. Okay. In other words, the transition program in Libya has to be one that would take into consideration the power blocks and the dynamics in Libya at the moment.
Absolutely, and 2022 has in store a lot to look forward to in terms of security on the continent. I'd like to say a very big thank you to you gentlemen for your insightful contributions, Kabir Adamu and Dr. Colombo Matoba. Thank you very much for taking your time to join us on the program.
Thank you very much.
And to our viewers, political instability is a problem to security in every part of the world. There's no better roadmap to a peaceful country than strong institutions and the rule of law. Security should be treated like the soul of development, as without it, there is no development. It's secure the continent. Play your part and stay safe. Thanks for watching. I am Gbenga Aborowa. Until next time, and secure the continent.